Hey guys, it's me, Big Jack 24 here. Today, once again, this is my second time trying to record this video. The first time, Gil interrupted me, and I had to redo the whole recording section. And I'm reacting to the Cold War Part 2 by OverSimplified, and all the copyright belongs to OverSimplified. All music right belongs to the respective owners, and and for time and for time's notice, I'm just going to skip about his tiny ad.
This video was made possible by Skillshare, an online learning community where you can learn just about my channel by signing up using the link below and get your first 2 months for free. For anyone who thinks recent US history has never been as crazy as it is right now, allow me to present to you the 1960s extreme cultural division made
Oh, yep.
political assassination.
Wait. I know that's Kennedy, King Martin Luther King Jr. Who is this? That's who I'm wondering.
And the closest the world has ever come to nuclear apocalypse. Shocked by the CIA's intrusive methods for putting down socialism in Latin America, a certain Fidel Castro met with a certain Che Guevara in a bar in Mexico City, and the two of them decided they should grow some awesome beards and overthrow the Cuban government, which is exactly what they did. Cuba had been America's summer playground, and America didn't like seeing a communist regime being set up in its own backyard. So
Neither it does today. Back then we didn't like it. Today we don't like it. Uh, but now they're starting to feel the down heavy effects of communism.
US immediately began training up Cuban exiles to invade Cuba and overthrow Castro. However, as the day of the operation came closer, Kennedy wanted to conceal any US involvement in the plan, so
I really actually want to know why Kennedy did that. I mean, what happened if we had a successful invasion of Cuba? Pretty sure Roosevelt done that. Theodore before he even became president.
massively scaled back American air support, and as a result, the Bay of Pigs invasion was a humiliating defeat for America. But Castro felt there was still an impending US threat to his regime. Meanwhile, in the Soviet Union, Khrushchev had a lot of medium-range nuclear missiles that couldn't reach America, but they
I'm pretty sure at the very least they can reach Alaska. But yet again, there's not that many towns there. I mean, there are some towns and cities, but I guess they're not that populated. And I'm pretty sure that Russia wouldn't want to start a direct war with the US.
but if they were positioned, say, on an exotic Caribbean island off the coast of Florida. Hey, I'm a communist who hates America. You're a communist who hates America. You know what that means?
That these guys are clearly going to lead your country's economies down.
Could fall in love. I was just gonna suggest you set your missiles up in Cuba. Oh,
I was going to suggest that you should revert to capitalism before your capitalism and democracy before your market crashes.
no, you're right. That's a better idea. Be still, my beating heart. On October 14th, 1962, a U-2 spy plane over Cuba noticed something strange. Sir, you need to look at this photograph. You're right. That's the cutest dog I've ever seen. Sir, I was referring more to the Soviet missiles. America
And so pretty much this was under a couple of major threats.
freaked out as they realized what was going on. They were completely vulnerable, and they
Wow. We would have definitely. There's no way you can't even fit all of these people. From this side of America into that area. I mean, we can that's not really going to work out, but we can also go to Alaska, but yeah, that's also under threat. I mean, we can go to a tiny bit of Canada, which is also under threat.
to act fast. They knew that airstrikes or an invasion of Cuba would likely mean nuclear war with the Soviet Union, so Kennedy came up with another idea, a blockade. The US Navy announced it would stop and search any Soviet ships heading to Cuba, and would sink any that did not comply. In response, the Soviet put its military into full combat readiness. The US did the same, and began drawing up plans for an attack on Cuba. Things were escalating fast, and both superpowers
Oh no, not NATO. Not NATO's trapped in this. Trapped in this again.
getting ready for World War III. Emergency communications between the two sides broke down as Khrushchev rejected Kennedy's demands for the missiles to be removed. And for the first time in history, U.S. Strategic Air Command moved to DEFCON 2. DEFCON 1 means nuclear war. The Soviets shot down a U-2 spy plane over Cuba. A Soviet nuclear submarine in the Caribbean mistakenly believed war had already broken out, and two of the senior officers gave the go-ahead to fire its nuclear torpedo. Thankfully, the third senior officer, this beautiful man, refused to authorize the decision.
We need to thank him for stopping World War III from breaking out.
Finalized its preparations, and I kid you not, the day before the US were set to decide the day and time for their Cuban invasion, Khrushchev was like, hey, you know if you just removed your missiles from Turkey, we'd remove ours from Cuba? Yeah, that sounds good to me. It was a bit more complicated than that, but at the last second, the two sides finally came to an agreement. Soviet missiles were shipped out of Cuba, and the world breathed one gigantic sigh of relief. Except for one guy, who was bloody livid.
He was pretty pissed, actually. Actually, he was extremely angry. He destroyed his own desk, his own office, really.
Let's hope that's the biggest crisis of my presidency. Unfortunately for him, his presidency was to end with one.
Yes. Yeah, which we don't, I don't want. Remember that? Like, a little while ago, I actually saw, like, I forget his name, but he actually filmed, Kennedy's troop around Dallas. And then I saw the assassination of Kennedy. It was from that film. Or not film, not in real life. No, I'm not that old.
Having nearly blown up the planet, a few changes were made. First, the superpowers agreed to a limited test ban treaty. Secondly,
that was in order to remember Kennedy.
Ousted Khrushchev and replaced him with Leonid Brezhnev, who was a kisser. He liked to kiss. Both sides were deeply concerned at the prospect of nuclear war, but still, the arms race raged on throughout the 60s and 70s. US intelligence worked out that the Soviets' nuclear arsenal was not as powerful as they previously thought, but in fact, it was America that held the advantage. ABMs and MIRVs were developed, and the doctrine of MAD. If both sides knew they would be completely destroyed by a nuclear war, neither would risk starting one. But even without war, the world was already feeling the effects of nuclear weapons. In 1966, above the pleasant town of Palomares in Spain, a US bomber collided with a tanker mid-air, and 4 hydrogen bombs fell and landed near the town below. It hasn't exploded, so I'm sure.
How do you collide with a tanker in midair? Like, I understand if you couldn't see the plane, like, above you or below you and you go down for just a tiny second. But I don't get it, like, if you're going sideways.
Things fine. Whoa, boy. Hey, I wouldn't eat that if I were you. Okay. What were you gonna do today? Go for a swim? Yeah, I wouldn't. Are you breathing right now? Yeah, I wouldn't. It took the Americans 2.5 months to find one of the bombs, which had gone missing in the ocean. This was the 14th time America had lost a nuclear bomb since 1950. Nobody knows.
Yeah. Yeah, let's just keep it at that way. Let's just keep it at 14 times. No more, no less. Just don't think about how many the Soviets had.
How many bombs the Soviet Union lost? So sleep well tonight. After Kennedy.
A very dark but crucial joke. Look, here's a reference to the oversimplified video, the Revolutionary War Part 2, the American Revolutionary War Part 2, which I would get to soon actually, but for now, not.
Assassination, Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson took over, and he inherited a developing crisis in the East, Vietnam. Back in the 50s, the Vietnamese had kicked their French colonizers out once and for all, and the country was divided into two. In the north, a communist regime, and in the south, an anti-communist regime. Both were
Alright.
by very sweet-looking old men, but don't let that deceive you. They were both ruthless dictators, and both
This is just like the Koreans.
dreamed of reuniting Vietnam under their own regime. So the North
Exactly like the Koreans.
established the National Liberation Front, also known as the Viet Cong, to carry out a campaign of guerrilla warfare in the South with Soviet support. The US sent advisors to help train the South Vietnamese to deal with the threat, but President Diem's brutal policies pushed more and more South Vietnamese to support the Viet Cong. And over the next decade, the situation escalated to a breaking point. America feared the domino effect. That is, if South Vietnam fell to communism, would Cambodia be next? Then Laos?
Well, it would only be Laos and Cambodia. Cambodia was likely to be freed freed. As when I went to Asia, I actually went to Cambodia. It was very nice there. Very nice. I mean, I was in some of the nicer parts of it, but and I actually got to be near like the Ho Chi Minh River, if I'm not mistaken. You can Cambodia is sort of now I what I believe and what I heard from sort of regrets allowing that decision to support the Viet Cong to happen.
Burma? India? LBJ had to make a choice between losing South Vietnam or sending in the troops, and so in they went. From 1965, America found itself in a war unlike anything it had ever fought before. Let's play Spot the Viet Cong Soldier.
All right, all right. I'm going to guess he's in the jungle somewhere.
Did you see him? Of course not. That's because millions of young American men were drafted and sent to fight a ruthless enemy who used the thick jungle as its shield. It was nearly impossible to tell where the enemy was, or worse, who it was. And as a result, the civilian population got caught up in the brutal crossfire. The city of Saigon found itself under regular attack, and America launched a bombing campaign in the north during Operation Rolling Thunder. The Viet Cong used the Ho Chi Minh Trail running through Laos and Cambodia to supply the campaign. It was a long
Yeah,
and
that's see back here that
Thunder. The Viet Cong used the Ho Chi Minh Trail running through Laos and
right here. So as what I was told from my tour guide in Cambodia, that there's over 400,000 Viet Cong hiding in Cambodia during the Vietnam War and going in and out of the south, south, and if you think that's not a lot, like America pretty much had sent in like a good portion of its troops, so it was still pretty much outmatched.
to supply the campaign. It was a long and brutal war, and I could never do it justice in this video. But in terms of the Cold War, Vietnam was probably the biggest of many, many global conflicts that signaled a turning point. Under the threat of nuclear war, the two superpowers began working to make their relationship more constructive, and as a result, their ideological battle shifted away from the potential of direct conflict and more towards attempting to influence smaller proxy wars around the world. In the Middle East, the Soviet Union provided aid against Israel during the Six-Day War, and then again when the US
Oh yeah, I forgot when Israel did the invading.
attacked Israel during the Yom Kippur War. In Africa, the Angolan Civil War saw US supported South Africans fighting Soviet supported Cubans. In the conflict between Somalia and Ethiopia, the superpowers interestingly switched sides as regimes changed, and the US continued fighting the spread of
That's gotta be awkward.
communism in its own backyard, funding the famous Contra groups to fight the socialist junta in Nicaragua. These proxy wars were fierce enough to begin with, but superpower intervention amplified the destruction and created alarming levels of human suffering.
Alright, let me see. We got the first Sudanese Civil War, Suzy Crisis, Congo Crisis, North Vietnam Civil, George Sandor. I'm gonna mispronounce all of these names. All these names at some point, so I'm just gonna have you guys read it out.
Throughout the Third World. And in Vietnam, that human suffering was all being broadcast back home via good old television. Going
Alright, I have one question. Whose idea was it to film the Vietnam War? As you guys know, since I was born more into I was more born in the about the late 80s, or early 90s, I can't remember which. It was some point that it was either 80. Yeah, it's been a long time since I remember having good memory of when my birthday is, and it's too confusing. Also, whose idea was it to film the war? Even as when I was learning about the Vietnam War, now I heard that people were sending footage back of the war. I'm like, why send back the footage of the war? Like, nobody did that during any of the world wars. You figure World War I didn't even have TV and more of film, film at that time, so really it wouldn't been like that. But during World War II, they didn't show you the footage, and I'm pretty sure showing the footage and the hippie movement would have definitely not worked out.
To the late 60s, America was a changing nation. This became this. This became this. And this became this. The new slogan
Yep.
that was taking root: make love, not war.
Alright, I'm gonna prove this slogan wrong. See, hippies want to have peace, but we can't all have peace. I mean, we can always have relatively good peace, but not really. See, but if you're in the middle of a war, do you think the best idea is to say make love, not war? Like, how do you think that would have worked against the Nazis? Nazis, like, all of a sudden we stopped stopped hanging out with allies after we just freed France, Italy, or just kicked Italy out of Africa. Africa or invaded Italy. Like, if we did that then what makes you think we're in a safe nation?
Majority of Americans did not approve of Johnson's handling of the Vietnam War, and in 1968, a silent majority elected law and order candidate Richard Nixon. As the Vietnam War appeared to be increasingly unwinnable, and public opinion turning increasingly sour, Nixon made the decision to begin bringing the troops home.
And as I'm going to explain on this, see, as he does explain, as you see this line here, on how most of the territories you see was not really gained by either side, and due to us being drawn out, this does not mean the Viet Cong beat us. I mean, they definitely did in booby traps and stuff, but we did tons of worse things. So once the soldiers were drawn out, it wasn't from the Viet Cong, it was just from public support. So that's mainly different on how we got out of Vietnam. So all those Vietnam War memes about America getting beaten up by Vietnam, that's not entirely true. I mean it was increasingly unwinnable, but it was only due to public support that we were losing it because we didn't get public support. We were being shamed, so nobody decided to help out the younger soldiers. So we got sent out, not beaten. And technically, I believe we can still invade Vietnam today. Because remember, we only withdraw troops. That doesn't mean we can't send them back.
Ended U.S. involvement in Vietnam by 1973. 2 years later, the South fell. The Cold War was
Look at that. Look at that. So pretty much, I just said so before. I was supposed to say, as you guys know, I don't usually use keycards for this or anything. In fact, so pretty much that without the U.S. there, the South would have fell a lot sooner. And due to this act the French quit NATO, but they had to rejoin in early 2000 for some reason.
taking its toll on both superpowers. In Russia, a huge percentage of the budget was still going to the military. People were still hungry, and they just didn't have access to the same lifestyle and goods as the.
Alright, let me see. Alright, let me read this as a good old capitalist. Are you still trying to peel potatoes for a shoe? We have vegetable peelers. Defect to the West now. Now get this free vegetable peeler with at the price at $2.99.
And what did they have to show for it? They weren't even winning the space race anymore. Both sides needed
Yep, they weren't winning that.
reduce spending in order to rescue their economies, and so both welcomed with open arms an easing of hostilities, otherwise known as détente. To improve relations, Nixon became the first U.S. president to visit Moscow in 1972, and Brezhnev returned the gesture a year later. A number of treaties were signed, including the 1972 SALT Agreement that limited nuclear weapons. Relations with China were even improving via ping-pong diplomacy when the U.S. table tennis team went on a tour of the People's Republic. However, internally, China was still pushing anti-capitalist propaganda, which led to some mixed messages. Nixon even visited China in 1972, and it was a barrel of laughs.
Let me see. Let me see. So let me see.
The president walks among priceless treasures from China's golden age. Among them, a pair of ear stoppers used by the emperor to keep from hearing criticism.
You put the stopper into his ears so that he couldn't hear the criticism. Give me a pair.
Yeah. Nixon, trust me, you would have loved to have that during your impeachment. Wait, what?
Everything was going great for Nixon, until it was uncovered that back home he was being a very naughty boy and violating constitutional protocol.
Yeah, that was true.
Announcing today my resignation as president, and I'm passing the office to my vice president, Gerald Ford. Wow, you mean in America the people can actually remove their leader when he breaks the law? Why not just rule by force? Where's the corruption? And my first act as president is to pardon Nixon. There it is.
It's not corruption. But if he gives you down to office, and then pretty much this has happened several times in U.S. history. But mainly, yeah, you do pardon the president after they resign or get kicked out or get impeached. Nixon got impeached, so Gerald Ford got in, so it wasn't corruption.
Whole fiasco, Americans decided what they really wanted was just a nice, safe guy who wouldn't cheat on them. So they elected Jimmy Carter, and the two sides.
This is where the other week, like a little while ago, you guys did know that I was worried about him when I heard that he took a tremendous fall like a couple of months ago. This is partially the reason why you're gonna know why I like that, why I just kept him here.
Met in Vienna, where they signed yet another strategic arms limitation treaty. It's an honor, Premier Brezhnev. Likewise, President Carter. Please don't do that. But that's not to say there was no longer any tension between the two sides, because there was. Heaps of it. Once again, the Soviet Union put down further attempts at reform and rebellion in the Eastern Bloc.
Prague, I'll get back to that later.
The Euro missile crisis saw new and improved classes of intermediate-range missiles being deployed in Europe. In 1979, the Soviets thought it would be a good idea if they had their own Vietnam and invaded Afghanistan to prevent a US-sponsored Islamic insurgency.
And as they should have known, now they're going to get kicked out of Afghanistan very easily.
Olympic Games. Conservatives were concerned that U.S. policy had become too soft, and in 1980, they decided they wanted a president who would be tough on communism, so they elected Ronald Reagan, and Reagan came in guns blazing.
And at first, really, sort of, some people didn't take him seriously, but it wasn't until you would later see on what he had done, and they're about to explain it here.
At the Soviet Union's human rights violations, he made a speech calling them an evil empire, and he also wanted to renew the arms race using technological advances in computing and lasers. He came up with the Space Defense Initiative, also known as Star Wars, which was basically.
I wonder where he got that idea from. A former actor getting the idea of Star Wars. I bet he saw the film. And really, this is the only nation with that only in use is technically Israel. And it's pretty much got its Iron Dome down on the ground, which is not exactly Star Wars, but as you're going to see in a while, but it is going to be like that.
Big defensive anti-nuke shield around the country, but a lot of people thought it was a pretty dumb idea. The Soviet Union perceived this shift in rhetoric as the USA getting ready for war, and they were feeling especially threatened as their relationship with their communist ally China had broken down. Relations took a big hit in 1983 when the Soviets shot down a Korean airliner that had strayed into their airspace, and it looked like the world was going right back to mid-20th century Cold War tension. But then Brezhnev got really old and died, and was
Thank God for that.
replaced by this guy who was really old and died.
Yeah, that guy was from the Stalin era, the 50s.
Was replaced by this guy who was really old and died, and he was replaced by Mikhail Gorbachev, coming in.
And as you guys should know, His dad, Gorbachev, was the guy who did destroy the Soviet Union, but without actually destroying it.
Office in 1985, he was the real game changer. His philosophy differed a lot from previous Soviet leaders. He felt that the reason the Soviet system and economy was struggling was that it didn't allow the Soviet people to find satisfaction in their work, because they weren't allowed to speak freely and lived in fear. Gorbachev
He still wanted it to be communist, but he just wanted to be more of a happier version of communism than what you found during when through what's his name? All right, it's confusing.
wanted the Soviet people to be happy, but unlike previous Soviet leaders, he actually made the change happen. Within the first couple of years, he began the political movement for more openness and transparency, and the restructuring of the Soviet political and economic systems. And change very quickly took effect. People could criticize the government, they could enjoy Western pop culture, the media interviewed Margaret Thatcher, but most importantly, the Soviet people could now enjoy Pizza Hut. All hail
Yeah, yeah. Now they wanted out to starve. Like, what are you gonna enjoy pizza? Say thanks to your president.
Gorbachev. He also knew that the arms race needed to end in order to rescue the Soviet economy, and a positive relationship with the West must be established. Constructive dialogue reopened and resulted in the INF Treaty, which saw all intermediate range missiles eliminated, which was huge. Reagan's tone towards the Soviet Union began to soften, and things were looking up. But what would these reforms mean for the Eastern Bloc? For decades, the Soviets had been brutally suppressing any attempt at change. Now, would they be allowed? And that was the exact question on Hungary's lips when the Prime Minister visited Moscow. Gorbachev's response: he didn't necessarily agree with the reforms, but he wouldn't stop them either. He was prepared to let the Eastern Bloc choose its own future. This was massive, and the Hungarian leaders began
Yep, let's see on how it would go. Oh wait, there's Yugoslavia.
free multi-party elections. Poland followed suit and also held elections in June. The anti-Soviet party Solidarity won 99 out of 100 seats in the Senate. But not just that. In Hungary, the barbed wire border between East and West was removed. The Iron Curtain was unraveling. But not all Eastern Bloc leaders were happy. Notably, East Germany was still ruled by a hardline Stalinist, Erich Honecker, and many East Germans were still eager to get out. They had been trapped by the Berlin Wall, but now they were doing the math. If they could travel to Hungary, and Hungary's border with the West was loosening, could they now make it to the West? That summer, East Germans decided Hungary was the latest top holiday destination. They traveled there in droves, and using various methods, tens of thousands crossed the border into Austria and the West. Honecker was furious and blocked travel to Hungary, but that civil liberties train had started rolling, and it wasn't stopping.
Yep, he got hit by a train, which was the Civil Liberties Express.
Thousands more flocked to the West German embassy in Prague, where they stormed the fence around the embassy gardens, and a temporary refugee camp was set up. In September, deals were struck to allow the refugees to travel west via train. Back in East Germany, the people were running on a civil liberties high, and they wanted their next hit. Dissent was growing. Over time, demonstrations turned to mass protest, with plainclothes secret police officers doing their best to put down the dissent, but it had grown well out of their control. And worse, the biggest demonstration was yet to come. We're gonna put all of this down by force, right, guys?
Uh, they're not going to do it. They're not going to do it, and nobody is gonna place down by force.
Guys? Unfortunately, everyone had realized what he had not. This was bigger than them, and the entire East German Politburo voted him out of power. On November 4th, over 500,000 East Germans took to the streets of East Berlin. For many, there was still one big target left in their sights: that damn wall. The pressure on the East German government was too great, and on November 9th, they made a bit of a chaotic announcement that the travel ban between East and West was being lifted. The change wasn't meant to take effect until the next day, and crossing guards still had orders to shoot on sight any who tried to cross. But that night, huge crowds gathered at the crossing points, and the
Which, if I wasn't mistaken, Putin was actually part of that guard, yeah, Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia. Yep.
guards were overwhelmed. In an astronomically historic moment, after decades of family separation and travel restriction, the people were allowed to pass through. East and
And now we need to. Now, North Korea needs to ask that question to South Korea. It's clearly now they should take out their dictator. Their their large dictator. I wish I was kidding, but he is large. Let's face it, with the belly. With the belly. And also, he's threatening us with a Christmas gift a while ago.
West Berliners couldn't believe it and celebrated together throughout the night. Some even climbed the wall and began to topple it. The Iron Curtain had fallen, and a year later, Germany would be reunited. Elections in Bulgaria, a peaceful revolution in Czechoslovakia, and a violent one in Romania brought to an end communist authority in the Eastern Bloc. America decided it would be best if it just stayed away and let the change happen, as the anti-communist movement continued all the way back to Moscow. Gorbachev had given the people the freedom to demonstrate. Now, they demonstrated for an end to the communist single-party rule, and Gorbachev had to give in. For the first time in history, elections were held in which candidates not officially endorsed by the party were allowed to run. Ambitious rival of Gorbachev, Boris Yeltsin, led a growing democratic movement. Now things here get quite confusing, and the dissolution of the Soviet Union is a complicated topic, so believe me, this is oversimplified.
Alright, so he's about to explain it, and I'm not gonna stop him. I'm just gonna get something good out of this. Alright, let's get this.
But it went a little bit like this. The Soviet Union was made up of a number of smaller Soviet republics, the largest of which was Russia. Yeltsin got himself elected the president of Russia and began a struggle for sovereignty against Gorbachev and the greater Soviet Union. Communist hardliners were horrified at what Gorbachev was allowing, so they briefly kidnapped him and tried to set up their own emergency government. But Yeltsin and his supporters all gathered around the White House in Moscow and were like, no, we have a tank. So the hardliners had to concede and released Gorbachev. Wow, thanks Boris. That was a
Oh yeah, Gorbachev is still alive today, and in fact, like, there's an interview with him not that long ago.
No problem. And thanks to you for all the great freedom you've given us. Anytime, pal. And just to inform you, I've used that freedom you've given us to go behind your back and make a deal with Ukraine and Belarus to dissolve the Soviet Union and set up the Russian Federation. In other words, you're no longer in charge. I am. Dude. So uncool. And so decades of tension and the everlasting threat of nuclear war finally came to an end as democratic governments were established in many of the old Soviet republics, and the world got along together forever after. Right, guys?
Alright, let's go back for a sec.
Soviet republics, and the world got along together forever after. Right, guys?
Alright, so Donald Trump's America, North Korea, Russia. I'm not sure if this is China or not. China or China. I'm pretty sure that's China. China or Japan. I don't know at this point. No, that's no wait, no, no, it's not the South Korean leader. No, no, I know this. She's probably the pretty sure that. Before I get anyone else wrong, I'm just gonna end the video there. Video there.
Hey,
Yep, it's definitely coming sooner as people are making predictions about it. Anyways, that was the Cold War Part 2 by OverSimplified. And also remember, all the copyright does belong to him. And also make sure to go to subscribe to him, and also make sure to leave a like on the video and comment down below on how well I did. Anyways, I'm on a timer run, so anyways, goodbye.